It better be under 3. So it is.
Come on.
So on this video, I'm going to talk through how I ran a sub 3 hour marathon and some of the things that I did in the lead up to it, on race day itself, and some of my thoughts and learnings from doing it. So first, I'm going to talk about the days leading up to it and the things that I did to prepare for the race itself. As I mentioned in previous videos, my preparation hasn't gone the best for it in terms of little niggles and lack of training in certain areas. So in my mind, I wasn't necessarily fully prepared for what was about to happen. However, I did everything I possibly could on the lead up to it in the week to make sure I was doing all the right things that I knew about to make sure that on the day I could perform as best as I possibly could. So some of those things were resting, essentially. I wanted to make sure my body was fully rested for the event itself. A lot of people, when they're doing a big marathon block of training, they'll taper for the event. As I hadn't done that big marathon block and I had a bit of a ad hoc training leading up to it, I didn't need to do that, but I wanted to make sure I was fully rested and fully able to compete at the level I wanted to. So leading up to it, in that week after my race pace run on the Sunday, so I did half marathon at race pace on the Sunday before, and then I did literally one 5k run in the week. And I stretched every single day, went to the gym 2 or 3 times doing like beach body weights. And then on the lead up to the actual race day itself, I made sure my diet was good. I made sure I was eating enough food. And for that, for me, was eating lots of calories on the lead up to it the day before and on the Friday, with the race being on the Sunday. And that included like pasta, bread, all the usual things you'd have and think about that are high in carbohydrates. Normally my diet leans more towards protein. I don't really think about carbohydrates that much, but I kind of emphasised and made sure I was having enough pasta and that sort of stuff on the lead up to it. Wanted to make sure my body was fully fueled for the marathon, because you know when you're out there, you're not going to be able to go and grab a sandwich half around the course. You need to make sure you're fully ready for the event. So I did that part of it pretty well, I thought. I was pretty prepared. I prepared in the right way for the marathon from a diet perspective, and I think I rested well enough leading into the marathon day itself. So then, as I got onto the marathon day, my plan was to arrive nice and early, give myself lots of time to be able to get to the start line. I did the London Marathon, so I got a lift actually to Greenwich and met my dad for a coffee in the morning. Well, I had a cup of tea and a banana. After I had my breakfast in the morning, which was a porridge with blueberries and a bit of protein in it, that's all I really had. And then I had some electrolyte drinks as well. And I was taking that on board. I think it was High Five, vitamin C in there as well. But yeah, just kind of a light, low-calorie drink to go with my breakfast. I made sure I was well hydrated the day before as well. Drank a lot of water the day before.
I'm Matt's coach, and Matt's going to run a decent time today. The weather's perfect here on Blackheath, and we're just about to go through the blue start, and wish Matt a lot of luck. Well done.
So on race day itself, I was fully prepared. I didn't have to take on too much water on the morning before the marathon, knowing my body was already fully hydrated because of the actual water I drank the day before the event itself. Headed to the start line at about 9 o'clock, got there and I left my dad. He went off to find a watching point on course. I got myself prepared, went to the toilet a couple of times, went to the urinals. I literally went like 3 times to the toilet in that 1 hour period. Mainly in my mind, I think I wanted to make sure I had all the liquids and everything I had out my body to make sure I was not going to stop on the route itself. I then put my bags in the baggage drop and headed to the wave. I was in wave 1, so I had to make sure I was not necessarily at the front, because in wave 1 at the front, people are running like 225s, 230s, 235s. So I was kind of like towards the back of that. And then got there, got prepared, got to the start line, and then the race started. And then I found myself thinking about pacing and thinking about all the things I need to do to make sure I didn't go too fast on that first section of course. So the first section of the route is at London notoriously quick. So I held myself back and ran 650s, 651s. That was my plan on my GPS. I actually ran a little bit quicker than that, but it was all around about the 647, 648 mark for that first 5-6 miles, which I was really happy with. meant people were like storming past me and running past me, and it felt a bit like I wanted to get competitive. Saw a few friends, some people that I knew out there that were running that I might potentially think I could be a bit quicker than, that I wanted to potentially run with, but I let them go. So I was a bit proud of myself for not getting too excited about the big experience and running with all these people and just holding my form, which was pretty impressive from my point of view. So then I headed into the second half of the race, and along the way I'm taking water at the water stations when possible. Not in the first 5k, but after that I was taking water on board in every single stop, and I'm just taking a little sip and pouring it over my head. Nothing crazy. And then I had my gels as well. So I had 3 Protein Rebel gels. They're all maple syrup. So I had that at, I think it was 10 miles, 18 miles, and then again at 23 miles, I think it was. So that was useful. I took on the Lucozade, just a little sip of that when they gave it out en route. I thought there's no harm in doing these things. It's not going to stop or affect me that much. I'm not stopping and drinking loads of it. Just little sips, bit of sugar. It can't be any bad for me. And my body's pretty good at kind of digesting food and running with food in my body. So I'm not worried about that sort of stuff. I was enjoying the race itself like a lot until around about 17 miles. I felt really, really good. I felt on pace. I felt like I wasn't in any trouble. I felt like I was about to go the whole way at this particular pace. So then things started to change a little bit. Things started to feel a little bit harder, like I had to work for it. And there's points on course where it's quite congested. You're going to go through stages where they'll try and funnel the crowds across the route, and it'll narrow it down to like one lane. And that was really affecting my pace when I was doing that. I wasn't able to kind of keep track of things. Until about 18 miles, I was running bang on like 650s on my watch, which for a 3-hour marathon, sub 3-hour marathon, that's pretty much bang on what you need to do. And one thing I noticed and didn't really think about too much was that my miles on my watch and the mile markers were at a different time. So I was actually running through the mile markers, and it was probably like 1.03 on my watch, and then it became like 2.08, and I was at the 2-mile marker in reality. So that kind of knocked me off a little bit, knowing that the mile markers in reality were further along than my GPS was telling me. But I still ground that out, and I stopped thinking about it around about 18 miles, and I thought, right, I've got to dig in and hold this form. So when I got to around about 20-ish miles, the pace picked up a little bit from my perspective, because I was joining in with a few of the people that I knew, and I was kind of got a bit excited. And I pushed it a little bit harder than I thought I did. And then when you go through some of the tunnels, it does knock out your GPS, so your watch is kind of a write-off at that point in time, which I think disrupted my marathon a little bit. So then as I approached like 21, 22 miles, I started getting cramp in my calves, which wasn't something I'd normally get on a run. I don't normally have calf issues, but running with the carbon shoes on my balls of my feet, which I tend to do, at a decent pace, once you get to a certain point, it's going to start hurting. Muscles are going to start tightening up and cramping. And I was definitely getting cramp in both my calves, which I was worried about. And then I got to like 23 miles, and it almost got to the point where I was thinking, this isn't going to work for me. I'm going to have to stop this race at some point and stretch my calves. But I grounded out. I was shaking my calves along the way, keeping moving. And then it started really hurting because I couldn't really use my calves the way I would normally do. I normally kind of bounce off them. So I was having to run very quaddy, essentially, and shuffle along at the pace that I wanted to keep going. So I found my pace slipping a little bit. And that meant that I wasn't thinking positive thoughts at that point in time. I was a bit worried about not hitting my goal, my target race time. So then in the last 2 miles, I really had to dig deep and push through to make sure I hit that target. But when I got to approximately about 800 meters to go, I realized I was going to be over the 3-hour mark for my time. I realized that my pacing was a bit off. I thought I'd gone through the first half marathon, like giving myself at least 45 seconds to a minute overall to get under that 3 hour. I was nowhere near that. I'd slowed down too much and had to really dig deep. I sprinted basically to get to that finish line over the last like 200, 300 meters to dip underneath the 3-hour mark. So my watch said 3:00 as I crossed the line, but it was actually 2:59.58 on my watch. So, sorry, on the official times, which was great. I had a good sprint finish with a colleague, Sam. He sprinted past me with like 800 meters to go and gave me a little boost, which was great. And yeah, I was pretty chuffed when I found that result out.
It better be under 3. So it is.
Come on, it better be under 3.
your time, Matt?
He's fucked him.
Yeah! Woo! 59!
Okay, now have a look at that. It's literally.
I was hoping for sub 3 hours. I've talked about on this channel that I wanted to do sub 3 hours, and to then actually do it was really pleasing, considering that my training wasn't what I intended it to be when I set out on that process. So
I just finished the London Marathon. I'm with my dad, little Phoebe and Lucy, and I was watching the finish line on this area here. Yeah! I did 2:59.58, so just underneath 3 hours. Really happy with it. I just spent the finish and everything. So here we go, we have a little post out here. Go Daddy, you're amazing! Had a whole chase going out and everything. But yeah, really happy with it. Training didn't go as well as I thought it would do, but the race itself was good at the time anyway. I held on, happy with that. So yeah, so the marathon ticks off. And see you soon.
yeah, really happy with my marathon experience. That was my day, that was my planning to get to the day, and they're the things that I encountered along the route itself. Enjoyed the experience, loved the crowds, and I'm going to lead into a few bits now about the things that I learned while running a sub 3 hour marathon. So some of the things that I learned while doing a sub 3 hour marathon were my watch. As I mentioned before, I was relying on my GPS to tell me the miles as I went along, rather than clicking the mile marker as I went past it on my watch. I wasn't doing that. So it meant that when I got to the later stage of the race, I was having to chase times essentially. So if you're doing a marathon, it's going to be longer because you're not following the fastest route. There's lots of people there, you're weaving, you're changing, and the GPS is often not very accurate on those kind of courses. So you're generally running a lot further than the actual marathon distance. I actually went through the marathon in like 2:58 on my watch, but I ran 26.56, I think it was, total for the marathon distance. So in the future, if I did a big city marathon, I would definitely be clicking my miles, my laps off as I cross the mile markers, rather than relying on my watch to do it, because you really have to run, say, 6:46s, 6:47s to run a sub 3 hour marathon, and not rely on the watch and think you have to run 6:51s to do that. So that's something I learned, and I think that I would definitely do differently next time. The last 4 miles were harder than I anticipated them to be. I know it's meant to be hard. Everyone says the last 4 miles are hard, but my race at Chester, when I did a 3:03 marathon, I stormed the last 6 miles. So I was running probably like 2:40 pace for the last 6 miles at Chester. So I was hoping it would come and that would feel easy and I would blast that last 4 miles. It didn't happen. I was running at my physical limit. I couldn't run any quicker. I was even pacing the entire thing. There was no pickup from me. And I wish I'd have known that or thought about that a bit more before getting into it, because it would have made things a bit easier knowing I had something hard to come at a certain point. But now that I've done that, and I've kind of pushed myself to my physical limit at that point in time, I'm pretty happy knowing that I can do another 3 hour marathon and then push on for a second half if I do the training to make sure that backs it up. But yeah, one thing I learned was that last 4 miles is going to hurt. And the final thing that I learned was Vaseline. Like on my training runs and on some of the half marathons I've done, I've had blisters all over my feet and been rubbing and that sort of stuff. And it's just, when I put Vaseline on, that doesn't happen. Ran the whole distance, not a single blister, not a single issue with my feet. That combined with the run-through kit socks, which are great, those stop the blisters, no issues at all. And I was putting Vaseline on my legs, so there's no chafing on my shorts as well. The run-through kit shorts as well were fantastic. So yeah, Vaseline, absolute charm having that. And it really did help me not get any issues at all with running that marathon. So I hope you found that video useful. I hope you found some of the things I mentioned there informative, and if you are planning on running a sub 3 hour marathon at some point, or running just a marathon in general, good luck. And for more information about myself, you can find me on @MattWoodyWood on all the different social media channels.